is the third time trying to film this. But the greatest American speeches is what I'll be reading today. This used to be my sister's book. It says the stories and transcripts of the words that changed our history. So this is the introduction. This book brings together the greatest American speeches, tracing the birth and growth of a still young nation in the words of its leaders and citizens. It tells the stories of why the speeches were given and how they became so important. Any selection of this kind is essentially subjective, and every reader will have his or her ideas about what should have been included or omitted. The speeches here have been chosen for their lasting relevance. Most are from recent history, although some of the greatest date from long before the age of broadcasting. While the majority are by prominent public and political figures, there are many from ordinary citizens, abolitionists, feminists, artists, sportsmen, and innovators, all giving voice to the issues, struggles, and achievements of their times. There are speeches that mark critical events, like the bombing of Pearl Harbor or the terrorist outrages of September 11th, 2001. There are studied pieces of oratory from George Washington, John F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Personal testimony from Lou Gehrig and Elie Wiesel, words of solemn simplicity from Ronald Reagan, eloquent passion from Frederick Douglass, and addresses given with irresistible spontaneity by General Patton and Robert F. Kennedy. Radio and television enable a speaker to address an entire nation at the same moment, and the impact of a speech can be assessed almost instantly. In the past, both reception and response were localized and limited, but slower means of communication allowed time for reflection. Abraham Lincoln's audience at Gettysburg were distinctly unimpressed by the reedy-voiced president's 3-minute address, yet within days the printed version of his speech was acknowledged as one of the greatest in American history, and is still considered so today. By contrast, modern media are unforgiving of mistakes, hesitation, and poor delivery. When Neil Armstrong stumbled over his carefully rehearsed lines as he took his first step on the moon, tongues tutted all around the world. However, his words are still quoted verbatim, mistake and all. The occasion upstaged the speaker and provided all the meaning for what he said. Written versions of speeches frequently differ from the words spoken at the time. Extemporizations are often lost, and some speakers cannot resist improving written versions after the event. We are dependent on historical documents and transcripts where the original sources are unavailable, and all these produce variations. A biographer's account of Sojourner Truth's passionate speech is not as authentic a source as, for example, recorded transmission of Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon, broadcast live on television. While some speakers are brief and to the point, others talk for hours. Where possible, speeches have been included in their entirety, but some of exceptional duration have had to be edited. Where this has been necessary, the most significant sections remain intact. Thomas Jefferson, who appears in this book, although he much preferred writing to speaking, stated, "Speeches that are measured by the hour will die by the hour. All the speeches of this collection have stood the test of time." So this book was printed in 2006. And this is the contents. So there's John Winthrop, Patrick Henry, Benjamin Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, John Brown, Abraham Lincoln, Crazy Horse, James G. Blaine, Booker T. Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Crystal Eastman, Clarence Darrow, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Frank Lloyd Wright, Lou Gehrig, General George S. Patton Jr., J. Robert Oppenheimer, Harry S. Truman, Eleanor Roosevelt, Joseph R. McCarthy, General Douglas MacArthur, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Lyndon B. Johnson, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Robert F. Kennedy, The Space Speeches, Richard M. Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, Barbara Bush, Bill Clinton, Elie Wiesel, George W. Bush, and Rudolph Giuliani. So the first one is John Winthrop. It says there is a twofold liberty, natural and civil or federal. Acquittal speech before the General Court of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1645. That's a picture of him over there. Some pilgrim. So I read the little grey box first, and it gives information about him first, and then the speech on the side. So it says, born the 22nd of January, 1588, in Edwardstown, Suffolk, England. Why did I almost say Indiana? I'm tired. I'm so sorry. Suffolk, England. Winthrop's speech on liberty was given on his acquittal on charges of having exceeded his authority as a magistrate. The speech was described by a contemporary historian, James Graham, as recalling the most interesting scenes of Greek and Roman history, while in the wisdom, piety, and dignity that it breathes, it resembles the magnanimous vindication of a judge of Israel. Died the 26th of March, 1649, in Boston, Massachusetts. The Puritan settlers who arrived in Massachusetts on the 12th of June, 1630, had left England in a search of life where they could practice their religious beliefs without persecution and build a completely new Christian society. The success of this radical social experiment was due to their leader, John Winthrop, who impressed upon his fellow colonists the need to accept group discipline and individual responsibility. Winthrop thought this new land was best ruled by a small number of educated and devout men who he believed were appointed by God to maintain law. Before they left England, Winthrop preached his famous sermon, A Model of Christian Charity, in which he cautioned the Massachusetts Bay colonists that we shall be as a city upon a hill, the eyes of all people are upon us. If their venture failed, he warned, we shall be made a story and a byword throughout the world. Born into a wealthy landowning family, Winthrop was a member of the English ruling class. He studied law at Cambridge University and gained a government post. From his youth, he was highly religious, his Puritan beliefs reinforcing his elitist worldview and giving him an urgent desire to improve the wicked world. An economic slump in England, together with the anti-Puritan policies that cost him his job at court, led Winthrop to accept the task of setting up a colony in what the English called the New World. Elected governor before the colonists left England, Winthrop was re-elected numerous times. As a moderate, he struggled against the excesses of radical Puritanism, limiting the number of executions for heresy and blocking oppressive innovations, like forcing women to wear a veil. As dissident Puritan groups gradually split away from the original colony and moved to settle other areas, Winthrop became regarded as the protector of Orthodox Puritanism. His own community, he believed, was favored by God above all others. However, tensions developed over the extent of his authority, and in 1645 led to accusations that he had exceeded his power. Winthrop and other magistrates were impeached following an incident in which people believed that they had involved themselves unnecessarily in a local election. After a 3-month dispute, Winthrop was acquitted and made his little speech, in which he defined his political philosophy: broad authority for magistrates and narrow liberty for the people, unlimited democracy. Married 4 times, Winthrop had at least 15 children and died of natural causes at the age of 61. President Ronald Reagan evoked Winthrop's vision of a new land of freedom, his city on a hill, in his own farewell speech on leaving office in 1989. The great questions that have troubled... Okay, so this is the actual speech that he said. So, this is what he said. The great questions that have troubled the country are about the authority of the magistrates and the liberty of the people. It is yourselves who have called us to this office, and being called by you, we have our authority from God in way of ordinance, such as hath the image of God eminently stamped upon it. The contempt and violation whereof hath been vindicated with examples of divine vengeance. I entreat you to consider that, when you choose magistrates, you take them from among yourselves, men subject to like passions as you are. We account him a good servant who breaks not his covenant. Therefore, when you see infirmities in us, you should reflect upon your own, and that would make you bear the more with us, and not be severe censurers of the failings of your magistrates, when you have continual experience of the like infirmities in yourselves and others. We account him a good servant who breaks not his covenant. The covenant between you and us is the oath you have taken of us, which is to this purpose, that we shall govern you and judge your causes by the rules of God's laws and our own, according to our best skill. When you agree with a workman to build you a ship or house, he undertakes as well for his skill as for his faithfulness, for it is his profession, and you pay him for both. But when you call one to be a magistrate, he doth not profess nor undertake to have sufficient skill for that office, nor can you furnish him with gifts. Therefore you must run the hazard of his skill and ability. But if he fail in faithfulness, which by his oath he is bound unto, that he must answer for. If it fall out that the case be clear to common apprehension, and the rule clear also, if he transgress here, the error is not in the skill, but in the evil of the will. It must be required of him. But if the case be doubtful, or the rule be doubtful, to men of such understanding, and parts of your magistrates are, if your magistrates should err here, yourselves must bear it. For the other point concerning liberty, I observe a great mistake in the country about that. There is a twofold liberty, natural, as our nature is now, corrupt, and civil or federal. The first is common to man with beasts and other creatures. By this man, as he stands in relation to man, simply hath liberty to do what he lists. It is a liberty to evil as well as to good. This liberty is incompatible and inconsistent with authority, and cannot endure at least restraint of the most just authority. The other kind of liberty I call civil or federal. It may be also termed moral, in reference to the covenant between God and man in the moral law, and the politic covenants and constitutions among men themselves. This liberty is the proper end and object of authority, and cannot subsist without it, and is a liberty to that only which is good, just and honest. This liberty you are to stand for, with the hazard not only of your goods, but of your lives, if need be. Whatsoever crosseth this is not authority, but a distemper thereof. This liberty is maintained and exercised in a way of subjection to authority. It is of the same kind of liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free. The woman's own choice makes such a man her husband, yet being so chosen, he is her Lord, and she is to be subject to him, yet in a way of liberty, not of bondage. And a true wife accounts her subjection her honor and freedom, and would not think her condition safe and free, but in her subjection to her husband's authority. Such is the liberty of the Church under the authority of Christ, her King and her husband. Quietly and cheerfully submit unto that authority which is set over you. On the other side, ye know who they are that complain of this yoke, and say, Let us break their bands, etc. We will not have this man to rule over us. Even so, brethren, it will be between you and your magistrates. If you stand for your natural contempt, corrupt liberties, and will do what is good in your own eyes, you will not endure the least weight of authority, but will murmur and oppose, and be always striving to shake off that yoke. But if you will be satisfied to enjoy such civil and lawful liberties, such as Christ allows you, then will you quietly and cheerfully submit unto that authority which is set over you, and all the administrations of it for your good, wherein, if we fail at any time, we hope we shall be willing, by God's assistance, to hearken to good advice from any of you, or in any other way of God. So shall your liberties be preserved in upholding the honor and the power of authority amongst you. So that was this guy, this pilgrim over here. I think it's him in the middle. John Winthrop. So I'm going to stop there, and then next time I read that, I'll just read the next speech that's in the book. So that was from American Speeches. So thanks for watching my videos. Hope it helped you fall asleep a little bit.